Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. I am Pooja Dwivedi, and in this segment today we are going to discuss about Syrian crises. This topic is important from the perspective of prelims and also from the perspective of GS mains papers. So let's begin with the topics of discussion that we are going to look at. First of all, we will talk about the news, then the highlights of the news. We will also discuss about UN resolution relating to Syria. We will discuss about India and Syria, the impacts that are intended, and conclusion or the way forward. And in the last of the segment, I am going to ask you a mains-based question for answer writing practice. So let's begin with the first topic. Why is it in the news? Now, this topic is in the news because India has called for an enhanced humanitarian and UN-led political transition in Syria and not any military action. So, we will discuss this news, and of course, the first point remains Syria-led, Syria-owned. The people of Syria should decide their fate and not any other country that is any other foreign intrusion like Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, India also supports Afghan-led, Afghan-owned peace process. Similarly, here also. Then UN facilitated, United Nations facilitated whatever the process that will be moved further by the UN is supported by India with the UN Security Council Resolution 2254. There can be no military solution to the Syrian conflict. India has learnt this. The world has learnt this from Afghanistan. What happened in Afghanistan is not supposed to happen in Syria. We need a stable Afghanistan. We need a stable Syria. Also, deeply concerned India is with the involvement of external actors in Syria, which is making the situation worse. Syrian women and children and the elderly have been severely impacted in disproportionate ways. Today's adoption, therefore, will reassure whatever adoption of the United Nations Security Council resolution. It will ensure 3.4 million people in the northwestern Syria. And India has also said that not only particular parts of Syria should get humanitarian assistance, but the entire Syria without any discrimination. Moving ahead, let's talk about Syria. Now, this map of Syria will show you the neighboring bordering countries and the regions of it. Syria is a country in West Asia. It is bordered by Mediterranean Sea, Turkey. Here is Turkey, Mediterranean Sea, Lebanon. Then we have Israel, Jordan and Iraq. So, of course, the neighboring countries are very much interested into Syria's stability. Syria's capital is Damascus and also its largest city. This region has remained in conflict since the past 10 years. 10 years. After 2 decades, we are witnessing what happened about the proxy wars in Afghanistan. Similar fate should not be met for Syria, that is in our minds. So, what started as a very peaceful protest in Syria, it now is a playground for big foreign powers for proxy wars. Proxy war is a war which is not happening in the country's home country, the region in which a country actually has its authority, but some other country. So many countries are involved here, from Russia, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, US and its many allies. So that is why India is saying we need Syria-led, Syria-owned political process to move forward and not proxy wars. Humanitarian assistance should also be given. Moving on, as you can see what happens that we will discuss when we will discuss the background of it. We will cover these two diagrams, but before, just see the number of people up till December 2020 who have been documented to be dead, and these are the numbers who were documented to be missing. Also, if we talk about the conflict, we will discuss the background of it first. So, as you can see, in 2011, successful uprising, the Arab Spring in Tunisia and Egypt, it gave hope to Syrian pro-democracy activists. So, from the neighboring regions, it was a hope which was arisen for the Syrian people that if they can do it, we can also protest against the raging unemployment, raging autocracy in Syria. So, this led to the Syrian government, which was led by Bashar al-Assad. They responded to the protests by killing hundreds of demonstrators and imprisoning many more, which gave rise to rebel groups, and also foreign powers started sending military supplies, weaponry, money and whatnot. Because, of course, in the stability of a region lies everybody's stability. and because of that, foreign powers backed some party or the other in order to have their influence over that region. That caused a big problem. Also, in July 2011, defectors from the military, they announced the formation of Free Syrian Army, which is a rebel group aiming to overthrow the government, and Syria began to slide into a civil war. Then, of course, we have discussed the statement and foreign backing and open intervention have played a large role in Syria's civil war. Russia entered the conflict in 2011 and has been the Syrian government's main ally since then. In September 2015, Russia launched a bombing campaign against what it is referring to as terrorist groups in Syria, which included the ISIS as well as FSA backed by the USA. Due to this, Syrian civil war has turned into a regional proxy war. And if we talk about who is controlling which territory, this map will show you. As you can see, the Kurds actually, it's a group in Syria. It's a rebel group in Syria, but it is not rebelling against the government. It hasn't yet rebelled against the government. They want to have their own, that is Syria-owned approach here. Then, as you can see, the major part is all about Syrian government. Syrian rebels, as you can see here, the smaller part. Then Turkish-backed Syrian rebels and Turkish military, the red region. Then comes the jihadist forces and the Islamic State group. This is up till December 2020. Moving ahead, let's talk about the UN Resolution 2254. Now, this particular resolution, it demanded all parties immediately cease any attacks against the civilian targets. It urged all member states to support efforts to achieve a ceasefire and requested the UN to convene the parties to engage into formal negotiation in the early of January 2016. Groups seen as terrorist groups by the UN Security Council, including IS, Iraq, Levant, and the Al-Nusra Front, were excluded. Offensive and defensive actions against such groups would continue, and a mechanism to monitor the ceasefire would also be set up. And just pay attention. Taliban, a militant group, a terrorist group, they were brought to the table by the US, and after that, as we can see, what is unfolding in the Afghanistan is such a sorry scene for all of us, especially for the neighbors. How, if we talk about the US, it is just withdrawing itself in a very messy way. It's not supposed to happen in Syria as well, because whenever proxy wars like that occur, of course, the ending is very messy and it's terrible for the people of that region. Let's talk about India and Syria. India has had good relations with Syria historically, but India has always taken a neutral stand to Assad's regime. India has a substantial interest in the field of trade and investment, diaspora, remittances, and energy security in the region. Now, because of the Syrian crisis, India, of course, had to abandon its oil investment in Syria. And though India has not dependent much on Syria for its energy needs, the political stability in the entire West Asian region is very important for India. More than 7 million Indians are working in these countries, and therefore the stability of the region should be India's priority. The way forward, if we talk about, first, the outside powers that are involved in Syria's civil war through proxy means needs to reconsider their decision, and they can of course look at Afghanistan as their biggest example right now. We don't want what has been happening since the last 10 years in Syria to continue to happen for the next 10 years, and then they talk about how they have reached a stalemate. Also, the two major powers, of course, the US and Russia, USSR, that is erstwhile USSR Russia, instead of reviving a Cold War era, should engage in constructive negotiations with the Syrian government. The Syrian government should be ready for a dialogue on Syria's future with the non-jihadist opposition groups. Let's talk about our question and how, in conclusion, I would like to say that India can play a part. India, of course, with the help of its developmental programs in Afghanistan, led a way forward in order for the other foreign powers to know that how a developmental approach can earn you goodwill. And of course, if you do not leave any sort of economic vacuum in a region, people will not become rebels. That is what is India trying to tell the region, tell the entire global power. that we need economic humanitarian support in such regions which are UN-led, and diplomacy can never be bypassed by the help of military actions. Let's talk about our question. In the light of the recent development in Afghanistan, analyze the concept of proxy wars with respect to Syria. So, I hope you'll be able to answer it correctly. That's it for today. Tomorrow we shall meet again with another segment. Until then, stay updated and thank you so much for watching.